The farm is long and narrow, with the house and barn nestled into a slight fold in the rise of land. Behind me, behind the house and the old drive shed and the vegetable garden, stands our big maple tree, overlooking the whole farm as though it were the echo in a later and lesser time.
Hello, my name is Stefan Westner, and I'm an artist and musician living in Fredericton, New Brunswick.
This tree one was definitely one of the more intense. It took me a few weeks of work. So for the past year, I've been working on illustrations for a book my grandfather is writing. Basically, to make a long story short, my grandparents moved with their children, including my mother, to Sussex from Toronto about 40 years ago. And they, since then, have been living there and raising animals and their kids. And along the way, my grandfather wrote a weekly column in the Kings County Record for 33 years. And it was just about his observations of life on the farm and life in general. A lot of the stories were just about the kind of life that you get when you're a university prof and an art teacher, and you move to rural New Brunswick with your kids and try to make a go of it without any idea of how to run a farm. A couple city slickers. So yeah, they were really witty, very heartfelt looks at country life, and from a pretty unique perspective. And my grandfather at one time was an English professor, so his writing has a certain flair that I've always appreciated. 2 or 3 years ago now, they moved to Fredericton. They're getting a little too old to run the farm, so we moved them closer to my parents. And basically, as soon as he stopped writing the column, he started working on a book, taking all the stories and observations that he put into those columns over the years, and reorganizing them into a story, sort of a glimpse into life in the country from his perspective.
This is when 2005. 2005, and that's 2014.
So this article came out in 2005, and here it says Jacob Erdman turns 20. Dr. Lee Whitney promised a 3-month run as a columnist, but two decades later he has no intention of quitting. And then here.
Hello, my name is either Jacob Erdman or Lee Whitney.
So the pen name Jacob Erdman came about because at the time when my grandfather started writing the column, he was a minister in the Anglican Church, and he felt nervous that some of his parishioners might object to him writing in a secular magazine, essentially. And also because the stories were very rooted in the community and the family and the life around the farm. He would occasionally mention members of the community, and also was worried they'd object to seeing themselves referred to, or making it obvious who was telling stories about them. Beyond the big maple, the night pasture slopes up and then slips beyond the rise to fall quite steeply into the wooded valley of the small stream that is our boundary there. The same stream that was our first summer here, also our bathtub. Beyond the stream, Gibbon Mountain. Writing was in his soul, writing and reading. And I definitely got the reading part from him and the love of literature. If not, I don't necessarily do much writing myself. I went more in the visual arts direction, which is from my grandmother. I think most of my presents were books or art supplies.
I've been interested in visual arts pretty well my entire life. My grandmother was an art teacher and is still an artist, and so would always she taught me how to draw, she taught me how to paint, and just gave me a kind of grounding in the arts.
because she's a pastel painter, the way that they have such subtle colors and tones in them. When we wanted to use those for illustrations in the book, or they did. But because of the way that pastel paintings look on when they're turned into black and white and shrank into a book, they didn't really translate as well. So last Christmas, I made a block print based on a photograph of the farm for my grandfather. And that kind of gave us the idea that maybe we could take my grandmother's paintings and drawings, and I could translate those into block prints to make them easier to fit into the book and easier to read and to see kind of the vision of the original pastel paintings. This was based on also an underdrawing of a cow that they had named Brownie, and she would take her feed bucket and wear it on her head. I don't know if you can tell from this, but she would flip it up onto her head and wear it kind of like a hat. But everything that you carve once you print it is reversed. So actually, you can see on this painting of the dog, after I drew it, I had to trace it in reverse onto this block. So it's mirrored, and then carve it, and then once I printed it, it comes back the same orientation as the painting. There was just something magical about that place. And so revisiting it in these images was a real treat. It's unfortunately no longer in the family, but we still know the people who own it now and can visit and see it continue to grow. So
one of the things that is great is just the amount of togetherness that we've had.
I've always learned a lot from my grandparents. They've always cared a lot about the things that I'm interested in. My grandmother taught me how to draw and see in a lot of ways, and because so much of drawing and art is how to see things. My grandfather, we always talk about philosophy and history, and he really helped me when I was younger understand how the world became what it is, and how history repeats itself, and how many things there are that we can learn about that are happening right now from looking back. And so looking back into these stories, again, what really struck me is just the attitude of let's figure it out. Let's figure out how to make this tool that we only just learned existed to do this thing that we've never had to do before in our lives. Let's learn how to milk a cow. They hadn't done that until they moved here. So, just forge ahead. You don't have to have your plan. You don't have to have everything figured out by any means. If you ask around and if you try and think about things, you can figure it out. You can get it done, or at least get somewhere that you are not at this point. And they built an amazing life and an amazing family, and that can kind of only give you hope, I guess. Just like me. My life is on the radio. They're saying it's a dream. I can tell.